How should you manage your zone 2 efforts after a weightlifting session? Is the question I'm going to answer in this video. I got a comment from one of the subscribers, Klaus, who asks, when I do my zone 2 cardio right after lifting, my heart rate is higher than usual. On these days, should I adjust by going slower, or should I ignore my heart rate and focus purely on RPE? So this is a really good question, and it's something I hear a lot, because obviously if you haven't done the weightlifting before, your heart rate is going to respond differently than if you have, simply because after the weightlifting session, your body is still kind of catching up to all the work that you did, and blood flow needs to be higher to feed the muscles and for them to recover from the work that you did previously. All those things make it so that your heart rate is just going to be a little bit higher, even if the effort itself isn't much harder. So as you alluded in the question, Klaus, what I would recommend is actually using RPE and not worrying too much about your heart rate if it has been influenced by a previous effort that you did, such as weightlifting. When I talk about RPE, rating of perceived exertion, it's probably, in my opinion, the easiest way to quantify intensity, especially when we talk about an endurance effort, but we can also use it in a strength training concept. That's something I can probably tackle in another video if you want. Make sure you leave me a comment below this video. So when it comes to low intensity training, zone 2 training, what kind of RPE should we be aiming for? I usually recommend 2 to 3 out of 10. So it's an effort that's really easy. You shouldn't feel any burning in the legs. You shouldn't feel any load on the respiratory system either. So it's really something pretty straightforward. And the idea behind making it that easy is that it's not going to impact your recovery negatively for the next session or for the next day. So typically, I like to say that low intensity training, you should have recovered from it within 24 hours. Now, obviously, if you extend the duration of a session past an hour and you're doing an hour and a half, 2.5 hours, 3.5 hours of cycling, for example, or you're training for an ultra marathon and you're doing a 2-hour or 3-hour run, then obviously that will have an impact on your recovery. But if we're just talking about accumulating a bit more low intensity volume after weightlifting and kind of just propping up the total minutes that you do in your week, I think doing 20 minutes, 30 minutes post weightlifting is a really good way to actually work this in. It's in line with the advice that I give most CrossFitters that I work with when they want to start including zone 2 in their training week, but they don't want to add 3 hours of training or 3 more sessions than they're currently doing. I'll usually say just tack on 20 to 30 minutes after 2 or 3 sessions in the week. And then if you can add maybe one hour session to that, we'll get to a solid 2 hours, 2.5 hours over the week of low intensity volume. And I've seen really positive results in terms of recovery, in terms of sleep, in terms of work capacity, especially for those who don't have an endurance training background and haven't done this type of low intensity work before, right? It's always a question of context. If you ran marathons your whole life and you switched to CrossFit, do you need an obscene amount of zone 2 training? No, you probably just need to practice the movements, learn the intensity of CrossFit, and be able to perform in that sport. You already have that endurance base. But conversely, if you've never done anything endurance based and you're just doing weightlifting or just doing bodybuilding or just doing CrossFit, then adding more zone 2 will be beneficial, even if you do it after lifting. And one thing that I hear a lot is that when you add low intensity after a lifting session, you're going to lose some of the adaptations from the strength training. This has been documented at the molecular level. So if you look at signaling pathways, mTOR, AMPK, mTOR being more protein synthesis oriented, so kind of muscle mass gain that would result from hypertrophy work or strength work, and the AMPK being the signaling pathway for mitochondrial biogenesis and other endurance adaptations. There seems to be some interferences between those pathways if you look at the molecular level, but if you zoom out and you just look at the athlete and you just plan training intelligently over time, we don't have that issue anymore. And it's always going to be better in my book to do both lifting or high intensity and low intensity instead of just picking one because it's better. No, there's too much discussion about right? We're always trying to pick between this and that. It's got to be weightlifting or low intensity training. It's got to be high intensity training or low intensity training. How about we can do both, and we should do both. And if we think about just the the health aspect, we can think about cardio as your longevity and strength as your function in your later years. So both are imperative to develop if you want to live the longest and most functional, most healthy life for as long as possible. So here's a very simple answer to the question. If you're doing low intensity after weightlifting, just use your perception, just use RPE to manage this. Stay at an easy pace. If you have to lower your wattage a bit, if you're on a bike, for example, compared to what you would do on a zone 2 session without the lifting before, that's fine. Do it a little bit lower if you need to. The point is that the work is done. The work is done. It wasn't too intense. It's not going to impact your recovery negatively. And we can really think now about just consistency over time and accumulating quality sessions day after day after day, week after week after week, because we know that this is what is going to bring the best adaptations and this is what's going to bring the best results ultimately, right? It's not the perfect session. It's not completely erasing interferences between different modalities of training. It's really just do the training, do it smartly, right? Organize your training smartly throughout the week so that you get the best out of what you're trying to do and you're kind of ticking all the boxes that you need to tick, but don't overthink it too much. Have fun training. I'll see you in the next video.